cipher with niggas that can't spit. Hate for ex-loves of my life while we ain't speaking. Hate the beans gotta reach its completion when you stop breathing. Hate the total lack of competition for the fetus. Hate opening shows for rap acts this leads beneath us. It's hate I try to shake it, I'll admit I hate trying. Rather manifest my rage and use hate to be lifeless. Above all else, self-hatred keeps me inspired to hate everything every man, woman, and child is.
This is Sulok. There was an article that was in the paper from Sunday, and somebody didn't throw out the paper yesterday, so I saw it, and I read it, and it made me very upset, because it was very, very dishonest, and I can demonstrate why. And it has to do with something that I've already talked about, but just in general, the media being dishonest and about their feelings, and there's just no real accountability, and sometimes I just get discouraged because I feel like I can demonstrate this in this video, what is going on here, but I don't know if it's going to change any minds. I think you are upset with the wrong people. If you are upset with Trump, there's are reasons to be upset with him, but typically not the reasons that you are assigning to him. Like in this example, him being a white supremacist, anti-Semite. It is absolute nonsense. He is considered by many Jews, typically observant Jews, to be a friend of Israel. So how do you explain that? Are they just ignoring the white supremacists because they themselves, in supporting conservative ideals, are white supremacists? Like what kind of cockamamie nonsense do you have to come up with to justify your confused view of things? Because you are not paying attention, and you are up in your feelings, and the country is tired of it. I am tired of it. This is not a strong start, but let's just jump in here, and I will explain what's going on. So, this was in the perspective section of the Denver Post from Sunday, December 15th, 2009. And the title of this op-ed is "White Nationalists Are Knocking on the Door." It is written by Ian Silveri, a columnist for the Denver Post, and he is also executive director of Progress Now Colorado, the state's largest progressive advocacy group. So let that be in the back of your mind as we dive into this. I'm going to queue up something else on my phone because we're going to need it in a minute. All right, so, quote from the beginning of the article. "You're brutal killers, not nice people at all, but you have to vote for me. You have no choice. You're not going to vote for Pocahontas, I can tell you that. You're not going to vote for the wealth tax. Yeah, let's take 100% of your wealth away." Those are word-for-word remarks from Donald Trump, the President of the United States, to the Israeli-American Council on December 7th. Despite being the subject of articles of impeachment filed last week for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, Trump found time to spew crass, degrading slurs aimed at both Native Americans and Jewish people in an unhinged, humiliating rant that would have ended the career of any other politician. Now, the next line says, "If you are reading this as a conservative, your brain has likely jumped to predictable whataboutery involving Ilhan Omar, the black Muslim congresswoman from Minnesota who has found herself repeating anti-Semitic tropes as well. That is a false equivalence that ignores the critical difference. Rep. Omar has recognized and apologized for these missteps and has committed to learn from them. Trump has not." So, that wasn't the first thing that occurred to me. The first thing that occurred to me was looking at that quote and saying, that doesn't make sense to me, knowing what I know about Trump, or thinking what I think about Trump. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see in what context this quote was used. And first we'll go to the quote from whitehouse.gov. This is the source of the transcript. And then I'll let you hear his own inflection, because this author is kind of a sleazeball in the way that he is manipulating you. He doesn't think much of your intelligence, so my assumption is that he saw something and just typed out this little article with his thumbs on his phone, and he didn't read the full context. It's like a Covington thing all over again, where it's like if you looked at the context and you knew what he was talking about, he's not saying what you're saying. But so I'm not necessarily assigning like malfeasance to this person. I would just assume incompetence, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was just like, well, this is good enough. Whatever is, there is no truth. It's just whatever suits my purposes. I'm very upset. So this is the quote. So we're going to spend $2 billion, and one of them is to buy a lousy location. He's talking about the embassy in Israel. A lot of you are in the real estate business because I know you very well. You're brutal killers. Everybody laughs. Not nice people at all. But you have to vote for me. You have no choice. You're not going to vote for Pocahontas. I can tell you that. Laughter and applause. You're not going to vote for the wealth tax. Yeah, let's take 100% of your wealth away. No. Even if you don't like me, some of you don't. Some of you don't like it. Some of you I don't like at all, actually. Ha ha ha. Everybody laughs. So so this is just like off the cuff stuff that he's saying with a mix of supporters and other people who probably aren't happy to see him there or whatever. But when he talks about the brutal killers, he's talking about in the context of like the real estate industry, and then he makes off the cuff remarks. This is framed in such a way where it sounds like he is just like wagging his finger at a bunch of Jews who are just forced to listen to him like rail against them. And that is so dishonest and cringy. And this is why I talk to people and they say, well, Trump, that anti-Semite. And I go like, yeah, but logically it doesn't make sense. Why are you believing this? And it's because of dishonest fucking tripe like this. I hate it. Enough. You're upset with the wrong people. Why are you being upset with Donald Trump for things that he never did when you continue to allow people to lie to you in this media, this shameful media? I don't understand it. And I'm going to let you hear Trump say it.
I said, you know what's going on? Yeah, they're looking at terrible locations. There are no good locations. You know why? Because we had the best already. We were there first, right? We were there early with you. He said, you know, but could you give me 2 days, sir? I'd like to take a look and see. He calls me back 2 days later. So we're going to spend $2 billion. And one of them is going to buy a lousy location. A lot of you are in the real estate business because I know you very well. You're brutal killers. Not nice people at all, but you have to vote for them. You have no choice. You're not going to vote for Pocahontas, I can tell you that. You're not going to vote for the wealth tax. Yeah, let's take 100% of your wealth away. No. Even if you don't like me, some of you don't. Some of you I don't like at all, actually. And you're going to be my biggest supporters because you'll be out of business in about 15 minutes if they get it. So I don't have to spend a lot of time on this.
Yeah, so
David calls me back.
these people, these quote-unquote journalists, are wagering against your ignorance. They are wagering against your intelligence, and you should be upset with them because they are greasy. What does Sargon of Akkad call them? Dirty smear merchants. It's what they do. Yeah, I think we should have had enough of this a long time ago. I don't know if the rest of that article is worth reading, but I'm going to read it just to set the tone of the kind of person that we're dealing with here. But I'm going to read this quote that I meant to read at the beginning of the video, but I was busy playing my rap song. So this quote is attributed to Hermann Goebbels. He was a Nazi propaganda minister, and I feel like it describes the progressive media machine pretty well too. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such a time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. Yeah, I think we've seen that. We've seen, especially when we're referring to the deep state, how the FBI has been behaving, how these unelected bureaucrats have been behaving and using their power. It's like, well, listen to us and do what we say. It's like, well, nobody voted for you. You're supposed to serve the president. You're supposed to serve these elected officials. And they have it backwards. Victor Davis Hanson, I think I mentioned in the last video, went into depth about these dynamics of what's going on. But I think there's been just enough going on in the news recently where you should be asking questions if you are not a haplessly credulous feeling person. And I know a lot of them. So, like, I'm just hoping that you gain a little bit of wisdom, because a lot of you, what you believe is just riddled with contradictions and nonsense. It doesn't make sense, and I don't understand how you make peace with it. Because that would bother me if I believed all these things and it was just like, well, that doesn't size up with that thing, and that kind of contradicts that thing. So, like, how do you? Is it faith? But you are a rational person, right? But are you putting faith in this? I don't know. I'll just continue with this stupid article from this snide, condescending prick. If you are reading this, conservative, blah, 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 blah. This brings us to a chilling few weeks of news here in Colorado, but first it's worth examining our state's history of racism and violence. He's wagging the finger at me. Racism and even genocidal crimes against humanity have been a part of Colorado's history since our territorial founding. In 1864, Cheyenne and Arapaho people were butchered by Colorado soldiers under an American flag. In 1936, Big Ed Johnson declared martial law and blockaded the New Mexican border to prevent impoverished fellow Americans from coming north. And during World War II, Governor Ralph Carr paid with his political career for standing up for the rights and dignity of Japanese American internees imprisoned in our state. Yeah, I don't necessarily have to endorse all of, like, any of those things. Like, it's like, if you're not a self-flagellating progressive like me, you endorse all of these things because, you know, we live in this system and it's all characterized by this supremacy. It's like, ugh. More recently, the resurgence of white supremacy and neo-Nazi ideology in America has found a home in Colorado. In 1984, Jewish Denver radio host Alan Berg was assassinated by members of a neo-Nazi cult known as the Order. The Southern Poverty Law Center has tracked the establishment and growth of a variety of white supremacist groups and violent neo-Nazi groups in Colorado over the years, naming 22 hate groups in Colorado, compared with 4 in Kansas, 1 in Wyoming, and 0 in New York. So I will say something about the Southern Poverty Law Center. They were recently sued by Majid Nawaz for defamation because they have a financial incentive from their donors. It's kind of a political smear machine, and I think they used to do good work, but now they're just kind of a political hit crew for hire. And Majid Nawaz sued them and won. He won his case for defamation. They are less than scrupulous people. There's kind of this unholy, like, there was something called the March Through the Institutions, and it's part of this progressive theme where it's like, well, instead of persuade, that's why they call you racist instead of trying to persuade you, because they don't have to. They just want to seize all the levers of power and then compel you to do things that they want you to do. That's why there's no attempt to be like, well, how could I persuade you, or how could I have a debate with you? They don't show up to debates. It's either you agree with us or you don't. It's a fucking cult. How can I how are you not, like, this month, an investigation by 9 News reporter Jeremy Jojala uncovered one of the advisors of the Atomwaffen division. It was a Nazi to make account for God's, A white supremacist was arrested in Pueblo while plotting to blow up a synagogue last month. So yeah, if you actually have, like, violent people who are real Nazis, I don't like those people. What do you want me to say? But it becomes increasingly hard to tell the real Nazis from the people who disagree with you, and by not being progressive, you just call them Nazis. You are muddying the waters with your unscrupulous horseshit. Tired of it. The latest revelation of alleged neo-Nazi influence in Colorado politics came from the Colorado Springs anti-fascists, who have outed other closet white supremacists in the area, including an Air Force Master Sergeant, demoted after the group's expose of his activities as part of a racist organization, Identity Europa. 2 comments on that. One, it's very classic that he is kind of tacitly endorsing Antifa here. That's basically what he's doing. He's like, yeah, go Antifa. You're doing God's work. And then the other part is, a racist organization, Identity Europa. So racism apparently has two definitions. Again, returning to the muddying of the waters. Are you talking about actual racism? Are you talking about racism plus power equals racism because everything is a power cult under the progressive regime? I think I look at progressives and I say, don't you make all of your determinations based on race? And isn't that fundamentally racist? And they go, no, we came up with this new definition based on, like, the Frankfurt School definition or whatever. It's creepy. It's just creepy shit. It's like, fundamentally what you are doing, according to every definition of racism I know, is racist. But no, because you identify as good people. It's ridiculous. I don't understand how people defend it. There was another radio producer, Kirk Widland. Antifa discovered a social media profile. The posts which the group put online were full of vile anti-Semitic and pro-Nazi content. Posts attributed to Widland idolized Adolf Hitler and claimed that America fought on the wrong side of World War II. If I don't agree with the idolizing of Hitler, but I think we should have probably taken Patton's advice and gone after the Ruskies. Would have saved us a lot of trouble. But hindsight, all of that. Let's see. Denies that the profile is his and told Jason Salzman that the liberal news site, the Colorado Times Recorder, this week that 2 years of shocking, racist, and unapologetically pro-Nazi posts unearthed by the group are fake, and that he is the victim of a smear campaign by anti-fascists. Based on the demonstration of your lack of scruples so far, I could believe that it's fake, but I don't know anything about it. But I honestly just don't believe anything that you say. Also, as far as the reporting, this is another thing that I forgot to mention. As far as the reporting of an increase, naming 22 hate groups in Colorado. Yeah, just the naming of hate groups, but I was keeping track of this guy, Matt Christensen, and he talks about, we have an increase of reporting in hate crimes since 2016. And you go, oh, well, that must be because people are committing more hate crimes. And it's like, well, not necessarily. He was describing this. Law enforcement in a lot of places has been required or opted into increasing their reporting and their methods of reporting. And so there's just more data than there was before. Whereas before there just wasn't any data. So in the presence of data where there was not data before, it looks like there is an increase, but it's not necessarily so. So it could be the case, but it also might just be that there's increased reporting. And by having more data, it looks like, I feel like this is too nuanced for feelings people. I don't know why I try to explain any of this, but for those of you who are conscious and not zombies, I hope that this makes sense. I don't want to cast shade, but I'm so tired. I feel like these children are enfranchised as voters, and they have such a backwards way of viewing the world, and I get upset at them. But here's the thing: I don't want to censor them. I think what you're doing is very hateful and ignorant, but I don't want to use some kind of measure of force against you to silence you. But you want to do that to me. So what does that say about your character and your stupid movement? But what is more likely that over the past 2 years of social media posts under the name of an unknown producer, blah, 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 or the radio station that recently fired a host for daring to criticize Trump on air, and whose hosts have held pro-ICE rallies, God forbid, at an Aurora detention center, simply as a high tolerance for racism and anti-Semitism. Sometimes it's simply as bad as it looks. Yeah, this article looks pretty bad. From the President of the United States to your local AM dial, from CNN to NPR constantly lecturing you. The true colors of hatred in this country are shining bright, and it's disgusting. But you aren't capable of hatred, are you? Because you identify as good people. Everything that you're doing seems to me to be pretty regressive. You are regressing into tribalism of man versus woman, race versus race. I think you are responsible for that. Not responsible. That's just the way that you frame everything. I don't want to blame you for it, but you are certainly willing to blame me unless I get on board with you. Before we solve this problem, we have to acknowledge that it's right here on our doorstep. Yeah, but you are not at all culpable because you are enlightened, liberal elite. It's absolutely insufferable. And I think just demonstrating how he clipped that article out of context, removed the inflection of what was clearly a joke, and he was talking about real estate people, not Jews in particular, referring to them as brutal killers. Like, how dishonest is that? But there's going to be no accountability for him. Because this paper is part of this. It's very liberal leaning. This guy's going to pat himself on the back. And here's the thing at the bottom of the picture, the bottom of it. It's people gather at Martin Luther King Jr. Monument in City Park in Denver, August 13, 2017, in response to a violent clash between white supremacists and counter-protesters in Charlottesville. So yeah, hearkening back to that. I will bring up, again, the Charlottesville hoax, where you can look at the transcript of what he was talking about. He was not calling white supremacists and Antifa good people. He was calling people on both sides of the monuments debate. Should we keep monuments? Should we remove monuments? He said there's good people on both sides. And the media widely reported in Goebbels fashion that he was saying white supremacists are good people. And people based their arguments off of that, which is something that never happened. And to this day, it still has an effect on public discourse. And I will tell people, progressive people, I would say, you know, he actually never said that. And they will just shake their heads and stomp their feet. And I said, do you want to look at the fucking transcript? And they said, no, I know what I know. And they cross their arms. And so I'm exhausted. I don't know what to do because I think that you are confused. And I think you could use better information, and you just think that everybody that doesn't agree with you is an anti-Semite, racist, blah, blah, blah. You are immature, and we're having to suffer. Again, you have a media that is appealing to your worst characteristics. It's appealing to your worst sensibilities. You should be upset at them because they are taking advantage of you. Wake the fuck up. Enough. That being said, let's take another example of media malfeasance here. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at the deep state. We got another one. I'm going to do one more article. I'm going to do it in my ready room. But I'm also going to have a little bit of coffee. And I might set up a little intermission so I can compose myself. Because I try not to be... I find emotion and anger to be very unpersuasive unless it's to those who are already persuaded. And then they go, yeah, I resonate with that. But if you don't resonate with that, it's very unpersuasive. But, you know, it's my show, so watch it if you want. Now, let's see. Starship Bridge. Give me a good song. Because I gotta catch my breath. Oh, there was a song that I heard at work and I wrote it down on a sticky note. I liked it, so I'm going to put that one on. And then I'm going to recuperate. Let's see. Can I use any of these other stations? No. Only the main chairs. I'm just going to go to my ready room. Commercials. Oh yeah. So yeah, there's this commercial and it's about catching Santa Claus, and I go, why are you trying to catch Santa Claus, you weirdo? Leave Santa alone. Leave Britney alone. Alright, but what we're going to get onto after these messages, we are going to hear about The Incredibly Incurious Mr. Comey by the editorial board at the Wall Street Journal. This is an article from yesterday. So I will share it with you after this break.
got the best hand. Sonny, tell me, what can I do? Sustainable blue, right? I played the aces on the bottom, and then I walked those old cards around. Then I walked those old cards around. I know what it's doing. Like I had three kings in my hand. I was a loser when the deal went down.
Uh-huh.
I want to tell you what happened to me.
You're gonna tell you what happened. So, this is the incredibly incurious Mr. Comey. The IG report shows investigators who didn't investigate Steele. And I will, before I even begin this, remember the Mueller report? And they were asking him questions about the report, and they said, "Did you look into the Steele dossier?" And he said, "It wasn't my purview, wasn't my responsibility." And so everybody that was paying attention was like, wasn't that the beginning, basically, of this entire investigation? And if you were doing it in good faith, you would have investigated something into it? He's just like, nope, basically my job was just to do political damage to opponents. He didn't say that, of course, but that's kind of the gist. So, the editorial board. James Comey has finally admitted some, quote, sloppiness over the surveillance warrant of former Trump campaign aide Carter Page. My phone turned. The former FBI director should reread Inspector General Michael Horowitz's report because it lays out a record of willful incuriosity about Christopher Steele and his dossier that is hard to credit as mere incompetence. Yeah, I want to give that to people and just say, well, like, you're not necessarily, I'm not going to assign ill will towards you. Maybe you just are not good at your job. But after a certain number of instances, it's like, I think you're just trying to mess around and you're up to no good. The report quotes Bill Priestap, a key FBI player in the 2016 Crossfire Hurricane probe into the Trump campaign, that the FBI had, quote, concerns about Mr. Steele's, quote, reporting the day we got it. Some of it was so sensational that we did not take it at face value. But if the FBI was initially skeptical, it isn't evident in the IG report. The report shows how the FBI avoided taking any action or asking any questions that might have undermined its use of the dossier in its application to the FISA court, or Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. By the way, the foreign surveillance, I think, is a misnomer. But the Crossfire team obtained Mr. Steele's dossier on September 19th, 2016. The FISA court didn't grant its warrant on Mr. Page until October 21st, 2016, giving it weeks to explore Mr. Steele's revelations. The former British spook had operated as a confidential FBI source since 2013, which meant he had his own Delta file containing all information concerning sources. So to everybody who just got triggered, which is probably nobody, but I'm making a joke, he's referring to a spook as an intelligence agent. It is not a racial epithet or epitext or whatever. So calm down. Yet the IG says the FBI didn't bother looking at Mr. Steele's file prior to obtaining the first FISA warrant. Even Mr. Steele's overseas handling agent was astonished at this, telling the IG that the Crossfire team should have, quote, turned the file upside down 2 months later when first handling Mr. Steele's information. The FBI also waited until November to talk to anyone who had worked with Mr. Steele during his tenure at Britain's MI6 after the FBI had fired him for talking to the press. Only then did it learn that former colleagues believed Mr. Steele was prone to, quote, rash judgments and had a, quote, lack of self-awareness. Sounds like a progressive to me. It didn't bother... I'm just talking shit. It didn't bother talking to his primary source until January 2017, when it discovered that much of the reporting Mr. Steele provided was gossip, idle gossip. The IG confirms that the FBI also made no effort to determine, quote, determine who was financing Steele's election-related research. Mr. Steele told the IG he knew who his paymasters were by late July, and Justice official Bruce Orr told Congress that he warned FBI officials in August that Mr. Steele was hired by somebody, quote, related to the Clinton campaign. A team of FBI officials interviewed Mr. Steele about early October. Nobody asked about his employer. Nor did they ask if Mr. Steele had been the source of a September 23rd, 2016 Yahoo News article that featured the FBI, that revealed the FBI was looking into the Trump-Russian collusion. Various case agents at the time of publication expressed alarm that Mr. Steele was talking to the press. He was. And a draft version of the FICE application fingered him as the leaker. But the IG says nobody at the October meeting asked Mr. Steele if he talked to the press. The final FICE application incorrectly asserted that the court that Mr. Steele had not. Let me get some more of this coffee. Yeah, this is sounding a little sketchy, isn't it? I think anybody who was paying attention to this investigation that went on for 2.5 years, 3 years, had these unanswered questions for a long time. And how did they go unanswered for so long? Media was complicit in this. The Crossfire sleuths also went to great effort to deny information to Justice Department attorneys reviewing the FICE application. The IG, quote, did not find any written communications indicating that anyone on the Crossfire Hurricane team advised Justice about the potential or suspected political connections to Steele's reporting. One Justice lawyer, Stuart Evans, asked the FBI team 3 times if Mr. Steele, quote, is affiliated with either campaign or has contributed to either campaign. I think we know the answer to that now. The Crossfire team answered only the second part of the question, saying that because Mr. Steele was a, quote, foreign national, he was, quote, unable to contribute to either campaign. Mr. Evans told the IG that he remembered being, quote, frustrated and annoyed by the answer. The FBI ultimately acknowledged that Mr. Steele was working on, quote, political opposition research, but rolled past Mr. Evans' concern that the application was not worth the, quote, risk of going after such a, quote, politically sensitive warrant. Which brings us to Mr. Comey's incredible incuriosity. Crossfire Hurricane was among the most politically fraught investigations in recent American history. Yet the IG says Mr. Comey recalls few details, says he was only periodically updated on the, quote, status and didn't make any, quote, significant investigative decisions. This is all what they call plausible deniability. All right, I'll continue. I lost my space. This is at odds with former Attorney General Loretta Lynch's testimony that the IG... to the IG that Mr. Comey in spring 2016 went out of his way to, quote, pull her aside to tell her that the FBI believed the Russians intended to use Page for information. Had the FBI done even basic due diligence on Mr. Steele, his financiers and sources, it would never have sought a FISA warrant. Mr. Comey and his investigators have a lot more to answer for than sloppiness. Yeah, this is a great deal of corruption going on in, I keep referring to the deep state. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but the deep state refers to the body of American government processes that are directed by unelected officials, represented by the FBI, the CIA, including the IRS, all of these agencies where people are appointed there, you would assume that their purpose is to serve the elected government. But, as is being demonstrated right now, they are the ones who are wielding a lot of the power. Nobody voted for these people. So the people did not choose them as representatives, and the fact that they are trying to coerce the president and the people around them, the IRS has been used in this fashion, the FBI clearly being used in this fashion. It's getting sketchy, and yeah, I feel like there's some questions that need to be answered. Unfortunately, the media is ignoring this. and you need to stop looking at, continue looking at Trump, keep an eye on Trump for sure, but like, stop blaming everything on him and start looking at the media that has clearly been playing you for a fool. I don't understand why they have lied and misdirected so much. I think if you're willing to make such, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of compromising integrity for short-term benefits, compromising the integrity of institutions, of democratic processes, so that you can make short-term gains. That is going to have long-term consequences, and it's very short-sighted. So I don't know. I'm just exhausted, so I'm going to call this one good. But hopefully this one was at least a little entertaining, and I didn't yell too much. It's upsetting. But this is Sulok signing out.